I never thought the deepest cut would come from my own blood. We told our son to move on after his brother got his wife pregnant. Then he took our granddaughter and disappeared. I used to believe there were certain things a family could survive. Money problems, arguments, bad decisions, even betrayal, if people were willing to be honest, apologize, and rebuild what they had broken. But I was wrong. There are some things a family does not survive. There are some wounds that do not heal just because the people who caused them are sorry later. And there are some words, once spoken, that become the last words your child ever lets you say to him. For us, those words were simple. Please, just move on. That was what my husband and I told our oldest son, Daniel, after his younger brother got Daniel's wife pregnant. I know how that sounds. I know there is no soft way to say it. Our younger son, Caleb, slept with Daniel's wife, Emily, not once. Not by accident. Not because they were drunk at some party and made one terrible mistake they instantly regretted. It had been going on for months. And by the time the truth came out, Emily was already pregnant. The baby was Caleb's. Daniel found out 3 days before what was supposed to be his 5th wedding anniversary. He came to our house that night looking like a man who had been carved hollow from the inside. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from trying not to cry. He stood in our living room holding a folded medical document in one hand and his wedding ring in the other. He looked at me first, then at his father. Then he said, "Did you know?" I should have said no. I should have run to him. I should have wrapped my arms around my son and told him that none of this was his fault. But I hesitated. It was only for a second. 1 second. That was all it took for Daniel to know. His face changed before I ever opened my mouth. "You knew," he whispered. My husband, Richard, looked away, and I, his mother, did the worst thing I have ever done in my life. I said, "Daniel, please sit down. We need to talk about this calmly." Calmly? My son had just discovered that his brother had destroyed his marriage, that his wife was carrying another man's child, and that his parents had known enough to prepare a speech, and I asked him to be calm. Daniel laughed once. It was not a real laugh. It was sharp and broken and empty. "How long?" he asked. Neither of us answered. He looked at his father. "How long have you known?" Richard rubbed his forehead and said, "A few weeks." That was another lie. It had been almost 2 months. Emily had come to me first. She showed up at our house one afternoon while Daniel was at work. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. At first I thought Daniel had done something. I thought maybe they were separating. Maybe they had argued. Then she told me she was pregnant. I was shocked, but not horrified. Daniel and Emily already had a little girl, Sophie, who was 4 years old at the time. Another baby should have been happy news. But then Emily said, "I don't know if it's Daniel's." I remember the room going still. I remember the hum of the refrigerator sounding too loud. I remember asking, "What do you mean? You don't know?" She covered her face and whispered, "It might be Caleb's." Caleb, my younger son, my sweet boy. The one who had always been charming, reckless, difficult, and somehow forgiven. From the time Caleb was little, people made excuses for him. He broke something, and we said he was curious. He lied, and we said he was scared. He hurt Daniel, and we said brothers fight. Daniel was the responsible one, the steady one, the boy who got good grades, helped with chores, and apologized even when he was not the one at fault. Caleb was the one who needed more attention. That was how we explained it. That was how we justified giving one child consequences and the other child comfort. Looking back now, I see the pattern so clearly it makes me sick. Daniel learned early that being good meant being ignored. Caleb learned early that being sorry meant being rescued. And Richard and I told ourselves we were raising them both with love. When Emily confessed, I should have called Daniel that day. Instead, I called Caleb. He came over within an hour, nervous and defensive. At first he denied it. Then he cried. Then he said it had only happened once. Then he admitted it had happened more than once. Then he said he loved Emily. Then he said he didn't know what he felt. Every version of the truth made him sound worse. And still, I kept looking for a way to protect him. Not Daniel. Caleb. I told myself I was trying to protect the family. I told myself Sophie didn't deserve to have her home destroyed. I told myself Daniel was strong. Daniel could handle pain. Daniel always handled pain. So we waited. We pushed Emily to get a paternity test quietly. We told Caleb to stay away. We told ourselves we were preventing chaos. But secrets do not prevent chaos. They only store it. And when Daniel found out, the explosion did not just destroy his marriage, it destroyed us. That night, in our living room, Daniel looked at me like he had finally seen a stranger wearing his mother's face. "You knew my wife was sleeping with my brother," he said slowly. "And you didn't tell me." I tried to explain. I said Emily had been scared. I said we wanted to be sure. I said we didn't want to hurt Sophie. At Sophie's name, Daniel's expression hardened. "Do not use my daughter to defend this." My husband stepped in then. He had always been uncomfortable with emotional confrontations. And when Richard felt guilty, he became stern. Daniel, he said, nobody is defending what happened. But there is a child involved now. Maybe 2 children. We have to think about what comes next. Daniel stared at him. What comes next? He repeated. Richard nodded as if that was reasonable. We're not saying forgive immediately, but eventually, for Sophie's sake, for the baby's sake, you may need to find a way to move on. There it was. Move on. The phrase that would haunt me forever. Daniel's mouth opened slightly, like the words had physically hit him. Then he looked at me. And God help me, I did not correct Richard. I said, your father is right. I know it hurts, sweetheart. But Caleb is still your brother. Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was something final in them. No, he said quietly. He stopped being my brother the moment he touched my wife. I whispered, Daniel. He raised one hand, not angry now, just done. And you stopped being my parents when you helped them hide it. Then he walked out. I thought he would come back. That is the arrogance of parents like us. We mistake blood for a leash. I thought he would cool down. I thought he would yell, cry, refuse our calls for a while, and then eventually answer. I thought Sophie would bring him back to us because he would never keep our granddaughter away. But Daniel had inherited one thing from me that I had never respected in him until it was turned against me. Once he made a decision, he did not move. For 3 days, he did not answer our calls. On the 4th day, Emily called me crying. Daniel had packed his things, not just his clothes, his documents. Sophie's documents, her school records, her medical files, the savings account information, everything. He had already spoken to a lawyer. He had already filed for divorce. And because Sophie was his legal daughter, because Emily was unstable, because the affair involved his own brother, and because Daniel had proof that Emily had been bringing Caleb into their home while Sophie slept upstairs, the temporary custody order went Daniel's way. Emily was allowed supervised visitation. Caleb was ordered to have no contact with Sophie, and Daniel moved out of the house before any of us understood that he was not just leaving Emily, he was leaving all of us. The last time I saw my granddaughter, she was standing beside Daniel's truck with a purple backpack on her shoulders and a stuffed rabbit under one arm. She looked so small. I remember hurrying down the driveway calling her name. Sophie, sweetheart, Grandma's here. She turned toward me automatically. Then Daniel stepped between us, not aggressively, not loudly, just enough to make the boundary visible. Don't, he said. I looked at him, shocked. Daniel, please let me hug her. He shook his head. She's confused enough. I'm her grandmother. His jaw tightened. And I was your son. Those words stopped me cold. Sophie peeked around his leg. Why? Daddy, is Grandma mad? Daniel crouched down, keeping his voice gentle in a way that somehow hurt more than anger. No, sweetheart. Grandma is just upset. Get in the truck, okay? She obeyed. She always trusted him. After the door closed, I reached for Daniel's sleeve. He stepped back before I could touch him. Please don't take her from us, I said. His eyes were tired, so tired. You already took enough from me. Then he got in the truck and drove away. For the first few weeks, we told ourselves this was temporary. Richard said Daniel was punishing us. Caleb said Daniel was being cruel. Emily said Daniel was using Sophie as a weapon, and I repeated all of it because the truth was too unbearable. The truth was that Daniel was protecting his daughter from the same family system that had taught him his pain mattered less than Caleb's comfort. At first, we tried everything. Calls, texts, emails, messages through relatives. Daniel blocked us one by one. We showed up at his old workplace. He no longer worked there. We went to his house. It was empty. Not just empty like someone had moved. Empty like he had erased himself. The neighbors said he had sold it. The school said Sophie was no longer enrolled. His phone number was disconnected. His social media disappeared. His friends stopped responding. At some point, Richard got angry and said, fine, let him have his tantrum. But it was not a tantrum. It was an ending. Months passed. Emily had the baby, a boy. She named him Noah. Caleb cried when he held him for the first time. I cried too. But my tears were complicated. Noah was innocent, completely innocent. A baby with Caleb's nose and Emily's eyes, born into a wreckage he did not create. But every time I held Noah, I thought of Sophie. I wondered if she still carried her purple backpack. I wondered if Daniel read her bedtime stories. I wondered if she asked about us. And then, I would feel angry at Daniel for making me wonder. That was the ugliest part of grief. It made me selfish. Instead of facing what I had done, I focused on what I had lost. 1 year passed, then 2. Caleb and Emily tried to build a life together, but relationships born from betrayal do not become peaceful just because people call them love. They fought constantly. Emily resented Caleb for ruining her marriage. Caleb resented Emily for reminding him of what he had done. Noah grew into a sweet little boy with anxious eyes who flinched whenever voices got too loud. Richard and I helped as much as we could. Money, babysitting, groceries, rent. We told ourselves that supporting Caleb was the only thing left to do. But deep down, I knew we were doing the same thing we had always done, cleaning up Caleb's mess, calling it love. By the third year, Emily left Caleb. She took Noah and moved in with her sister. Caleb fell apart. He drank. He lost his job. He called us at midnight sobbing about how everyone abandoned him. Richard got quieter. I got older. And Daniel stayed gone. The only proof that my oldest son was still alive came once a year. On Sophie's birthday, a card would arrive. No return address. Inside would be a printed photo. Never a note. Just Sophie. The first year, she was missing her front tooth, smiling beside a lake. The second year, she was on a bicycle, wearing a pink helmet. The third year, she stood in a classroom, holding a certificate. The fourth year, she was taller, her hair in braids, standing beside Daniel in front of mountains. Daniel looked different. Leaner. Stronger. Peaceful. In a way I had never seen when he lived near us. That photo broke me. Not because he looked miserable. Because he didn't. I had spent years telling myself he would come back when he needed us. But he did not look like a man who needed us. He looked like a man who had survived us. I sat at the kitchen table holding that picture until my hands went numb. Richard came in, saw it, and said nothing. For a long time we just stared. Then he whispered, "We lost him." It was the first honest thing either of us had said in years. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say there was still time. But the picture in my hands told the truth. Daniel had built a life somewhere we could not reach, and Sophie was growing up inside that life, safe from us, loved by him, protected from the chaos we once called family. The 5th year after Daniel disappeared, Richard had a stroke. It was not massive, but it was frightening. One side of his face drooped, his speech slurred. He spent 4 days in the hospital and came home walking slower, his pride shaken. That was when Richard started asking for Daniel. At first, he tried to hide it. He would sit in his recliner late at night, looking at old photos on his phone. Daniel, at 1-6, holding a basketball trophy. Daniel, at 22 graduating college. Daniel, on his wedding day, smiling beside Emily, unaware of the future, standing beside him like a shadow. One night, I heard Richard crying in the den. My husband was not a man who cried easily. I found him holding a photo of Daniel and Caleb as children. Daniel was maybe 9, Caleb was 5. They were sitting on the porch steps, popsicles melting down their hands. Richard looked up at me and said, "I taught him that Caleb mattered more." I sat beside him. Neither of us tried it, because by then, denial had become exhausting. A week later, Richard asked me to find Daniel. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because we had tried before. We had searched online. We had asked people. We had even hired a private investigator once, but Daniel had covered his tracks carefully. He had not disappeared like a man running away. He had disappeared like a man closing a door. But Richard's health made me desperate, so I tried again. This time, I found something. Not Daniel directly. Sophie. She was older now. Almost 10. Her school had posted photos from a regional science fair. There she was, standing beside a project board with her name printed clearly. Sophie Hart. Hart was Daniel's middle name. He had changed their last name. The school was in Oregon. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Oregon. All those years, my son and granddaughter had been across the country living under a name we did not know. I should have stopped there. I should have respected the silence he had chosen, but regret is not always noble. Sometimes it is hungry. Sometimes it convinces you that your pain gives you permission to reopen someone else's wound. I found the school address, then I found a town, then through a community article about a local youth soccer team, I found Daniel. He was listed as an assistant coach. Daniel Hart. There was a picture of him kneeling beside a group of children in soccer uniforms, one arm around Sophie's shoulders. He was smiling. Not the polite smile he used to give at family dinners when Caleb interrupted him. A real smile. My son was alive. My son was happy. And my first instinct was not gratitude. It was jealousy. I hated myself for that. But I looked at that picture and thought, how dare you be happy without us? Then immediately after, another thought came. How dare we expect anything else? I printed the article and showed Richard. He cried again. This time, he said, I need to see him before I die. He was not dying. Not then. But fear makes people dramatic. And guilt makes them desperate. We argued for 2 days about whether to contact Daniel. Richard wanted to go there. I said that was too much. Then I wrote a letter. It took me 7 drafts. In the first version, I explained too much. In the second, I apologized too little. In the third, I mentioned Sophie, and then crossed it out because I knew asking for access to her would make the apology selfish. Finally, I wrote the only words that were true. Daniel, we were wrong. Not confused. Not trying our best. Not caught in a difficult situation. Wrong. We protected Caleb when we should have protected you. We asked you to forgive something unforgivable because forgiving him would have made our lives easier. We used Sophie's name to pressure you when we should have cared about what she was being exposed to. I am sorry. Your father is sorry, too. We do not deserve a relationship with you. We do not deserve a relationship with Sophie. But if you are ever willing to speak to us, even once, we will listen without defending ourselves. Mom. I sent it to the soccer club address because I did not have his home address. Then I waited. A month passed. Nothing. 2 months. Nothing. Richard's hope faded into bitterness. He won't answer, he said. He wants us to suffer. For once, I did not agree with him. No, I said. He wants peace. Richard looked at me sharply, but he did not argue. 3 months after I sent the letter, an envelope arrived. No return address. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down before opening it. Inside was one sheet of paper. The handwriting was Daniel's. Mom, I got your letter. I believe that you are sorry. I also believe that you still do not fully understand what you are sorry for. You lost a son and a granddaughter. I lost my wife, my brother, my parents, my home, my name, my trust, and the version of my life I thought was real. You had years to tell the truth before I found out. You chose silence. Then, when I was standing in front of you broken, you asked me to make the betrayal easier for everyone else. That is why I left. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally understood that if I stayed, Sophie would learn the same lesson I learned as a child. That love means tolerating harm to keep the family comfortable. I will not teach her that. Do not come here. Do not contact her school. Do not reach out through anyone else. If I ever decide to speak with you, it will be my decision. Daniel. I read the letter once, then again. Then I folded it carefully, and placed it on the table. Richard asked what it said. I handed it to him. He read it in silence. When he finished, his face twisted with anger. So, that's it? He snapped. He gets to lecture us like we're monsters? I looked at him and, for the first time in our marriage, I saw the same pattern in him that I had spent years refusing to name. Guilt became anger because anger was easier. He's right, I said. Richard slammed the paper down. He took our granddaughter. No, I said, my voice shaking. We gave him every reason to. That was the beginning of the end of Richard's denial. Not because my words changed him immediately, they didn't. He sulked for days, but the letter stayed on the kitchen table. He kept reading it, sometimes at breakfast, sometimes late at night, sometimes when he thought I was not looking, and slowly something in him cracked. One evening he said, "Do you remember when Daniel was 14 and Caleb stole money from his drawer?" I nodded. Daniel had saved for months to buy a used guitar. Caleb took the money and spent it with friends at the mall. We made Caleb apologize. Then we told Daniel not to be dramatic because Caleb felt bad. Richard whispered, "Daniel never bought the guitar." I remembered. God help me. I remembered everything after that. Daniel's canceled birthday dinner because Caleb had gotten suspended. Daniel giving Caleb his car because Caleb needed a fresh start. Daniel being asked to let Caleb stay with him after college, only for Caleb to bring parties into his apartment. Daniel paying for damages Caleb caused. Daniel standing at our table every holiday, quiet and polite, while Caleb turned every conversation back to himself. We did not create Caleb's affair with Emily, but we created the world where Caleb believed there would always be someone else to absorb the damage. And that someone had always been Daniel. 6 months after Daniel's letter, Caleb came to our house asking for money. He looked terrible. None. Thin, unshaven, smelling faintly of alcohol and stale cigarettes. He said Emily was threatening to take Noah out of state. He said he needed a lawyer. He said he had changed. He said nobody believed in him. For years, I would have opened my checkbook before he finished speaking. This time, I did not. I said, "No." Caleb stared at me. "What? We are not giving you money." His face hardened. "So, Daniel finally got to you." Richard stood from his chair, slower than before, but steadier than I expected. "Do not blame your brother." Caleb laughed. "My brother? He abandoned all of us." "No," Richard said. "He escaped." The room went silent. Caleb looked like his father had slapped him. Then his anger exploded. He shouted that Daniel was selfish, that Emily had seduced him, that everyone treated him like a villain, that Noah was his son and he deserved support, that family was supposed to help family. I watched him scream those words in the same living room where Daniel had once stood silently holding his broken marriage in his hands. And finally, I understood the difference. Daniel had asked for truth. Caleb demanded rescue. When Caleb left that night, he slammed the door so hard a picture fell from the hallway wall. It was an old family portrait, all 4 of us smiling. The glass cracked straight across Daniel's face. I picked it up and carried it to the trash, then stopped. Instead, I removed the photo from the broken frame. I cut Daniel's childhood picture out carefully and placed it in a small album with the birthday photos he had sent of Sophie. It was not enough. Nothing would ever be enough. But it was the first time I chose to keep Daniel without keeping the lie of who we had been. Another year passed. Richard's health declined, not dramatically, but steadily. He had good days and bad days. On bad days, he would sit by the window and ask whether Daniel had written again. He had not. Then, one cold November morning, Richard fell in the bathroom. At the hospital, the doctor told us his heart was weaker than they had thought. Richard listened quietly. After the doctor left, he turned to me and said, "Write to him again." I said, "Daniel told us not to." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I know, then we shouldn't." He swallowed hard. "I don't want to ask him to come. I just want him to know I'm sorry before I can't say it." So, I wrote another letter. This time, it was from Richard. He dictated it slowly from his hospital bed, stopping often to breathe. "Daniel, I failed you. I called it discipline when I was hard on you. I called it patience when I excused Caleb. But the truth is, I expected you to be strong because it was convenient for me. When Caleb hurt you, I protected myself from the discomfort of holding him accountable. When he destroyed your marriage, I did it again. I am ashamed. You owe me nothing, not a visit, not forgiveness, not even a reply. But I need you to know that your leaving forced me to see what kind of father I had been. I am sorry, son. Dad." We mailed it. This time, Daniel answered in 3 weeks. His letter was shorter. "Dad, I read your letter. Thank you for saying it without asking anything from me. I hope your health improves. Daniel." Richard held that letter against his chest and cried like a child. It was not forgiveness, but it was something. For a while, something was enough. Then came the day that changed everything again. It was Sophie's 11th birthday. For 6 years, a photo had arrived on that day. That year, nothing came. I told myself mail was slow. 1 day passed, then 3, then a week. Richard tried not to show his disappointment, but every time the mail truck passed, he looked toward the window. On the 10th day, an envelope arrived. It was thicker than usual. Inside was a photo of Sophie smiling beside a birthday cake shaped like a stack of books. Behind her stood Daniel. And beside Daniel stood a woman we had never seen before. She had kind eyes and one hand resting gently on Sophie's shoulder. On the back of the photo, Daniel had written one sentence. Sophie asked if she could send this one. I stared at those words until tears fell onto the paper. Sophie asked, not Daniel. Sophie. Our granddaughter knew we existed. She knew enough to ask. I turned the photo over again and looked at her face. She was not the little girl with the purple backpack anymore. She was taller now, confident, bright-eyed, and she was standing between 2 adults who looked calm, safe, happy. Richard touched the image gently. "Who is the woman?" he whispered. I did not know. A month later, we found out. A wedding announcement appeared online in a small Oregon newspaper. Daniel Hart and Claire Bennett. Claire was a teacher. Daniel had remarried. The ceremony was small, held in a garden. Sophie was listed as junior bridesmaid. I read the announcement 3 times, feeling a strange mix of joy and grief. My son had found love again. He had built a family again, and we had not been there. That night, Richard said, "I'm glad." His voice broke, but he meant it. "I'm glad he's not alone." I nodded. For the first time, my grief did not feel like anger. It felt like acceptance. Daniel was not punishing us by living well. He was healing, and healing, we had learned, does not always include the people who caused the wound. 2 years later, Richard died. It happened in spring, quietly. He went to sleep and did not wake up. On his bedside table were 3 things: his glasses, Daniel's last letter, and the photo of Sophie's 11th birthday. I called Caleb first. He cried, but even in grief, he made everything chaotic. He wanted to know about the will. He wanted to know if Emily had been contacted. He wanted to know if Noah would get anything. Then I sat alone for almost an hour before calling the number Daniel had used once to confirm receipt of Richard's letter. I did not expect him to answer. He did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, "Daniel, it's Mom." Silence. I closed my eyes. "Your father passed away this morning." I heard him inhale slowly. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "I'm sorry." 2 words, polite, distant, more than I deserved. I said, "I'm not asking you to come." Another silence. Then he said, "Thank you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "He loved you." Daniel did not answer. I forced myself to continue. "He knew he failed you. He knew it before he died." Daniel's voice was lower when he replied, "I'm glad he knew." It hurt, but it was honest. The funeral was small. Caleb came late. He brought Noah, who was 8 by then, quiet and serious. Emily did not come. During the service, Caleb cried loudly, too loudly. People comforted him. They always had. I sat in the front row with dry eyes, holding Richard's folded memorial program, thinking about the son who was not there. Then, just as the service ended, I saw him. Daniel stood near the back of the chapel. For a second, I thought grief had made me imagine him, but he was real, older, broader, a little gray at the temples. Beside him stood Sophie, now 13, wearing a black dress and holding his hand. Claire stood on his other side. My breath stopped. Caleb saw him, too. His face went pale. For one suspended moment, our broken family existed in the same room again. Then Caleb moved first. He started toward Daniel, crying, "Danny." Daniel's body went still. Sophie's hand tightened around his. Claire stepped slightly closer to them. Caleb stopped a few feet away. "Please," he said. "I'm sorry. I was stupid. I ruined everything. I know I did. But Dad's gone. We can't keep doing this." Daniel looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "We are not doing anything, Caleb. I am living my life." Caleb flinched. "I lost my brother." Daniel's voice did not rise. "You threw him away." People nearby pretended not to listen. I wanted to disappear. Caleb wiped his face. "Can I at least meet Sophie?" Daniel's expression hardened. "No. She's my niece." Sophie looked up at her father. Daniel looked down at her, and his face softened. Then he looked back at Caleb. "She is my daughter, and she is not responsible for making you feel forgiven." Caleb broke. He covered his face and sobbed. "Years ago, I would have gone to him. That day, I stayed seated." Daniel walked past him and came toward me. I stood on shaking legs. Sophie stayed close to his side. For the first time in 8 years, my son stood in front of me. I wanted to hug him so badly it physically hurt, but I remembered his driveway. I remembered him stepping back from my hand, so I did not reach. I said, "Thank you for coming." He nodded. Sophie wanted to say goodbye to her grandfather. I looked at my granddaughter. She studied me with cautious eyes. Not hateful, just guarded. I smiled through tears. "Hello, Sophie." She looked at Daniel first. He gave her a small nod. Then she said, "Hi." Her voice was older than I remembered, and younger than I expected. I wanted to say 100 things. "I missed you. I love you. I'm sorry. Do you remember me?" But I had learned, finally, that my feelings did not give me the right to burden her. So I said, "Your grandfather kept every photo your dad sent." Sophie looked surprised. "He did?" I nodded. "He loved seeing how much you grew." Her eyes softened a little. Daniel watched me carefully. I did not ask for more. I did not ask where they were staying. I did not ask if I could see her again. I simply said, "Thank you for letting her come." Daniel's face changed, just slightly. Maybe respect, maybe relief. After the burial, Daniel approached me alone. Sophie and Claire waited near the car. He said, "You handled that better than I expected." I almost laughed through my tears. I've had 8 years to learn one lesson. What lesson? That love, without respect, becomes selfish. Daniel looked away. For a while, we stood in silence. Then he said, "Sophie knows the basics." My heart clenched. She knows her mother hurt me. She knows Caleb was involved. She knows you and Dad made choices that made it unsafe for us to stay. I nodded, tears slipping down my face. "Does she hate us?" Daniel looked at me then. "No. But she doesn't know you. That hurt more than hate would have. Hate still means there is a connection. Not knowing someone means the connection has already died." I whispered, "I understand." Daniel studied me. Then he said, "Claire thinks people can change." I smiled faintly. "She sounds kind." "She is. I'm glad you found her." His eyes searched my face as if checking for resentment. There was none, only sorrow. He nodded once. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me an envelope. "Sophie wrote this before we came. She wasn't sure if she wanted to give it to you." My hands trembled as I took it. "Should I read it now?" Daniel shook his head. "Later." Then he turned to leave. Panic rose in me. Not the old selfish panic that wanted to grab and demand. A quieter panic. "Daniel." The fear that this was all I would ever get. "Daniel," I said. He stopped. I forced myself not to cry harder. "I'm proud of you." His shoulders tensed. "I should have said that when you were a boy. I should have said it when you became a husband. I should have said it when you became a father. But I was always too busy expecting you to be fine." He did not turn around, but he did not walk away. So I finished. "You were not fine. And you still became good. You became the kind of father you deserve to have." Daniel bowed his head. For a second, I thought he might cry. Then he said, "Goodbye, Mom." And he walked back to his wife and daughter. I watched them drive away. This time, I did not chase. That night, alone in my house, I opened Sophie's letter. Her handwriting was neat and careful. "Dear Grandma, Dad said I can decide if I want to write to you. I don't remember a lot from when I was little. I remember your kitchen had yellow curtains. I remember Grandpa gave me chocolate even when Dad said not too much. I remember being confused when we left. Dad never said mean things about you. He said adults made mistakes and some mistakes change families forever. I don't know if I want to visit. I don't know if Dad wants that either. But I wanted you to know I'm okay. Dad is a good dad. Claire is nice. I like books, soccer, and lemon cake. I hope Grandpa knew I remembered him. Sophie. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried until morning. Not because it promised a future, it did not. But because my granddaughter, the little girl we had lost through our own choices, had given me a piece of truth without cruelty. I'm okay. Dad is a good dad. That was the mercy. Not forgiveness. Mercy. In the months after Richard's funeral, Daniel and I exchanged 3 emails. Short ones. Careful ones. He told me Sophie was doing well in school. I told him I had started therapy. He said he was glad. I told him Caleb had asked about him. Daniel did not respond to that part. I learned not to mention Caleb again. One afternoon, my therapist asked me what I wanted from Daniel. I started to say, a relationship. Then I stopped, because wanting a relationship was still centered on me. So, I said the truer thing, I want him to never regret leaving. My therapist nodded. That became my prayer. Not that Daniel would come back. Not that Sophie would call me grandma with warmth in her voice. Not that the family would be restored like those sentimental movies where everyone cries at Thanksgiving and the past melts away. My prayer was simpler. Let my son be free. Let my granddaughter feel safe. Let the damage end with us. Caleb did not understand that. He continued spiraling for a while. He blamed Daniel for dividing the family. He blamed Emily for tempting him. He blamed us for not helping enough. He blamed grief, stress, bad luck, everyone but himself. Then one day Noah asked him a question. I know because Caleb told me later during the first honest conversation we ever had. Noah had asked, did Uncle Daniel leave because of me? Caleb said the question destroyed him. He realized his son was carrying shame for a story he had been born into. That was when Caleb finally went to counseling. Not because we forced him. Not because Daniel forgave him. Because his own child had begun absorbing the poison. It took years, but Caleb changed in small, painful ways. Not into a hero. Real change is not that clean. He still struggled. He still had selfish instincts. He still wanted forgiveness before accountability. But he started paying child support consistently. He stopped drinking. He apologized to Emily without asking her to come back. And one day, he asked me for Daniel's address. I said no. He got angry. Then he breathed through it and said, okay. That was the first time I saw him accept a boundary without punishing someone for it. Maybe there was hope for him, but hope for Caleb did not mean access to Daniel. That distinction took me too long to learn. 3 years after Richard died, Sophie turned 16. A photo arrived in the mail again, this time with a short note from Daniel. She got her learner's permit. Pray for me. I laughed and cried at same time. In the photo, Sophie stood beside an old blue car, grinning proudly. Daniel stood next to her, pretending to look terrified. Claire was laughing in the background. On the back, Sophie had written, still like lemon cake. I placed the photo on the mantle, not as a claim, as a gift. Later that year, Daniel called me. I was washing dishes when the phone rang. His name appeared on the screen and I nearly dropped a plate. Hello? Hi. Mom. That word. Mom. I gripped the counter. Hi, Daniel. He cleared his throat. Sophie has a soccer tournament next month. It's a few hours from you. I stayed silent, afraid that speaking would break whatever was happening. He continued. She asked if you might want to come watch one game. I closed my eyes. I would love to. There are conditions. Anything. You come alone. You don't bring Caleb. You don't tell Caleb. You don't introduce yourself to her friends as her grandmother, unless she does first. If she gets overwhelmed, we leave. If I say the visit is over, it's over. Yes, I said immediately. I mean it. I know. Yes. And Mom? Yes. This is not a reunion. My heart hurt, but I understood. I know. It's one game. One game is more than I deserve. There was a pause. Then Daniel said quietly, that's why I'm considering it. The tournament was held on a windy Saturday morning. I arrived early and sat on the far side of the bleachers, hands folded tightly in my lap. When Sophie ran onto the field, I recognized her instantly, not because she looked like the little girl from the driveway, because she moved like Daniel, focused, determined, quietly strong. Daniel saw me before Sophie did. He gave one small nod. Claire smiled gently. During the game, I did not shout too much. I did not cry visibly. I did not try to make myself part of the moment. I simply watched my granddaughter play soccer under a gray sky, and felt the strange holiness of being allowed to witness something I had no right to demand. After the game, Sophie walked over with Daniel beside her. Her cheeks were flushed from running. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. You played beautifully. She smiled a little. Thanks. An awkward silence followed. Then I remembered. I brought something. Daniel's posture stiffened. I quickly added, only if it's okay. I pulled a small container from my bag. Lemon cake. Sophie looked at it, then at Daniel. He looked at me. I said, no pressure. I just remembered. For a moment, no one moved. Then Sophie smiled, a real smile. I still like lemon cake, she said. I know. We sat at a picnic table after the game. Only for 20 minutes. We talked about school, soccer, books, and the weather. Not about the past. Not about Emily. Not about Caleb. Not about forgiveness. At the end, Sophie hugged me. It was quick, careful, but it was real. I did not hold on too long. I let her pull away first. Daniel noticed. On his way back to the car, he stopped beside me. "You did well today," he said. It was such a small sentence, but coming from him, it felt like grace. I nodded because I could not speak. Years have passed since then. Our relationship is not what I once imagined. Daniel does not call every week. Sophie does not spend holidays at my house. Claire is kind, but protective. And Caleb has never been allowed near Daniel's family. That is the boundary. It may be permanent. I accept that. Sometimes people hear pieces of our story and say, but family should forgive. I used to believe that too. Now I know forgiveness is not a command you give to the wounded so the guilty can sleep better. Forgiveness, if it comes, belongs to the person who is hurt. And sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is accept that their child's peace requires distance from them. I still regret what we did every day. I regret the silence. I regret the excuses. I regret the way I looked at Daniel's pain and immediately calculated how to protect Caleb from consequences. I regret saying, "Move on," when I should have said, "I am on your side," because that was all Daniel needed from us that night. Not a solution, not a lecture, not a plan for the baby, not a speech about family, just one clear sentence. "Son, I am on your side." We did not give him that. So he chose a side for himself. He chose his daughter. He chose peace. He chose a life where betrayal did not get dressed up as family obligation. And for years, I called that cruel because I could not bear to call it justified. Now, when I look at the latest photo on my mantle, I see Daniel standing beside Sophie at her high school graduation. Claire is there, too, proud and smiling. Sophie is holding a diploma in one hand and lemon cake in the other because apparently that became our small tradition. On the back of the photo, she wrote, "Thank you for coming, Grandma, Grandma." The word still makes me cry. Not because it means everything is fixed. It isn't. Some things do not get fixed. Some chairs stay empty. Some apologies arrive too late to rebuild what was destroyed. Richard never got the reunion he wanted. Daniel never got the parents he deserved when he needed them most. Sophie never got the childhood where both sides of her family could sit in the same room without history breathing down their necks. And me? I never got back the years I lost. But I got the truth. And the truth, painful as it is, gave me one final chance to stop doing harm. So, if you are a parent listening to this and one child has hurt another, do not ask the wounded child to keep the family together. Do not call their boundaries cruelty. Do not mistake silence for disrespect. Do not tell them to move on just because accountability would make your life uncomfortable. Because one day, they might do exactly what Daniel did. They might move on. Without you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. And if they take their child, their peace, their name, and their future with them, you may spend the rest of your life staring at old photos wondering why you thought blood was stronger than betrayal. We told our son to forgive his brother for getting his wife pregnant. We told, move on. So, he did. He moved on from his wife. He moved on from his brother. And then, finally, he moved on from us. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.